I'm standing under the glittering lights of the Lamont Winter Gala. The chandeliers sparkle like ice above our heads, casting a diamond dust glow over the velvet and silk-clad figures that glide across the marble floor. Everyone here looks like they stepped out of a fashion magazine, their laughter like the clinking of expensive crystal. My sister Bellamy is the center of her own glittering universe, her couture gown a shimmer of black sequins that probably cost more than my apartment building. She smirks as her eyes rake over my dress, a pale blue silk gown I designed and stitched myself, every seam a secret whispered in the dead of night. "You look like you bought that off a clearance rack," she says, her voice just loud enough for her circle of designer-clad friends and a few stray onlookers to hear. Laughter bubbles up from the group, a cruel, harmonious sound that seems to echo in the vast ballroom. Their eyes, all judgmental and sharp, slice into me, making me feel small, insignificant, a weed in a garden of prize-winning roses. My cheeks burn, a hot, shameful flush creeping up my neck. I want the marble floor to swallow me whole. But then, he steps in, Dante Rivaux, the world-renowned designer himself, a man whose name is a religion in this world. He moves with a quiet authority that parts the crowd like a ship through water. His eyes, dark and intense, scan the room before they land on me. And they stop. He stares, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock, his jaw slack. A hush begins to fall over our part of the room as people notice the living legend, frozen, staring at a no-name girl in a pale blue dress. Then he says it, his voice a low, resonant baritone that carries with impossible clarity over the fading music, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "There you are, my muse." Bellamy's champagne flute, the one she was holding with such casual arrogance, slips from her hand. It doesn't shatter, but lands on the thick carpet with a dull, muffled thud that sounds like a gavel. Her face freezes, the smug smile wiped away, replaced by a mask of pale, confused horror. Every head turns. Every eye is on me. The whispers start, a wave of sound rippling through the stunned silence. But this story, this moment that feels like the world tilting on its axis, didn't begin here, under the crystal chandeliers. It didn't start with the validation of a fashion god or the silent shock on my sister's face. It began on a different night, in a different room, a night I was banned from my sister's engagement party for being too embarrassing to look at. It all started in the manicured gardens of our family home, under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights that were supposed to feel magical, but instead felt like 1,000 tiny mocking eyes. Bellamy was getting engaged to a man whose net worth was discussed more often than his personality. It was the social event of the season for our family, a declaration of status. I had spent weeks, every spare moment I had, designing and creating a dress for the occasion. It was a deep emerald green, with a simple, elegant cut that I thought was sophisticated. I was proud of it. I felt for the first time in a long time, like I might actually fit in. I was wrong. I walked onto the patio, and the conversation, the laughter, it all just stopped. Bellamy, standing beside her fiancé, looked at me, and her face, for a split second, was a mask of pure fury. Then, just as quickly, it smoothed into a placid, vaguely confused expression. She turned to her friends, a perfectly manicured hand gesturing vaguely in my direction. "I'm not sure who that is," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "She must be with the catering staff." A few of her friends snickered. My brother, Corbin, standing nearby, looked down at his shoes, his shoulders hunched. He knew who I was, he just didn't have the courage to say it. The humiliation was a physical blow. It felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. But the final, killing strike came from my own mother. She glided over to me, her smile tight and unforgiving. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words were sharp enough to cut glass. "Sorella, what are you wearing?" she whispered, her eyes full of a deep, weary disappointment that was somehow worse than anger. "You are embarrassing this family. Go home. And please do not attend any of the other wedding events. We can't have this." She gestured to my dress, to me, as if I were a stain on her perfect party. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked away. the sound of their returning laughter chasing me down the long stone driveway. Back in my tiny apartment, the city lights a blur through my tears. I ripped the emerald dress from my body. I threw it in a corner. I collapsed onto my floor, surrounded by my sketches, fabrics, and a broken sewing machine I was still trying to fix. The tears came then, hot and furious. Tears of shame, of rage, of a deep aching loneliness. I cried for the girl who just wanted her sister to be proud of her, for the daughter who just wanted her mother to accept her. When the tears finally stopped, something else had taken their place, a cold, hard knot of resolve in the pit of my stomach. I picked up my sketchbook, my hand still trembling slightly. I stared at the blank page, and I whispered the words into the silence of my room, a promise to myself, a vow that would become my entire world. One day, I breathed, the words tasting like ash and iron. One day, they'll regret ever calling me cheap. That night, something inside me broke, but something else was forged in its place. Something harder, sharper, and utterly unbreakable. The girl who cried over a ruined party was gone. In her place was a woman with a needle for a sword and a sketchbook for a shield, ready to build an empire out of their scorn. The months that followed were a blur of exhaustion and relentless, grinding work. My life became a carefully calibrated balancing act, a tightrope walk over a canyon of debt and fatigue. I kept my 2 waitressing jobs, one at a bustling downtown brunch spot, where the smell of bacon and burnt coffee clung to my clothes, and another at a dimly lit Italian restaurant where I'd spend my evenings pouring wine for couples who spent more on a single meal than I made in a week. The 2 worlds couldn't have been more different, but they were united by a single desperate purpose: funding my real life, the one that began after midnight. My apartment, already small, shrank even further, crowded by bolts of fabric, dress forms draped in half-finished projects, and piles of fashion magazines I'd bought with my tip money. My second-hand sewing machine, a clunky, temperamental beast I'd named the Tyrant, became my only companion in the lonely hours of the night. It whirred and groaned, a constant soundtrack to my obsession. My fingers were perpetually raw, pricked and calloused from needles, burned from the iron and stained with dye. More than once I fell asleep at the machine, my cheek pressed against a cool swathe of silk, only to be jolted awake by the sunrise, my neck stiff and my head pounding. I'd stitch tiny, perfect seams with fingers that were bleeding, literally pouring my own blood, sweat, and tears into the fabric. I filled out applications for fashion internships, dozens of them, sending them out into the digital void with a flicker of hope that always died a slow death. My portfolio was just a collection of sketches and photos of the few pieces I'd managed to complete. I had no formal training, no degree from a prestigious design school, no connections. The replies never came. The silence from the fashion world was as deafening as the derision from my family. The holiday season arrived, cloaked in a bitter chill that seemed to seep into my bones. My mother, in a rare act of what she probably considered magnanimity, insisted I attend the family's Christmas dinner. "It wouldn't look right if you weren't there," she'd said over the phone, her tone leaving no room for argument. So I went, my stomach in knots. The house was aggressively festive, every surface draped in gold ribbon and fresh pine. The air was thick with the scent of roasted duck and my sister's expensive perfume. The gift exchange was the main event, a ritual of showcasing wealth and status. Bellamy, beaming, handed out sleek black boxes to our parents and our brother, Corbin. Inside each was a ludicrously expensive watch. "I wanted to get you all something to mark the time until the wedding," she announced, preening. The oohs and ahs filled the room. Then, it was my turn. Bellamy handed me a small, soft package wrapped in cheap cartoon reindeer paper she'd probably had the maid buy. "This is for you, Sorella," she said, her voice laced with pity. I opened it. Inside was a pair of thick, gray thermal socks. "I figured you must get cold walking to your little jobs all the time," she added to the tittering amusement of her fiancé. I forced a smile, the muscles in my face aching with the effort. "Thank you, Bellamy. They're very practical." When it was my turn to give my gifts, I felt a familiar wave of shame wash over me. I had spent weeks knitting a beautiful, intricate scarf for my father, using expensive merino wool I couldn't really afford. It was a deep charcoal gray, his favorite color. I handed it to him, my hands trembling slightly. He unwrapped it, held it up for a moment, and gave a non-committal grunt. Oh, a scarf, how quaint. He folded it neatly and set it aside, his attention already shifting to the conversation about stock options. Bellamy didn't even try to hide her smirk. I couldn't take it anymore. I made my excuses, an early shift at the restaurant, and fled. The cold night air was a welcome shock to my system. I stood outside in the snow, not wanting to go back to my empty apartment just yet. I watched my breath fog in the crisp air, each plume a visible sign of the life still in me, the fight they hadn't managed to extinguish. My father's voice echoed in my head, a conversation from earlier in the evening when he'd pulled me aside. He'd looked at me not with anger, but with a kind of weary resignation. "Sorella," he'd said, his voice low, "this obsession with sewing, it's a nice hobby, but it's not a career. You're a win. You should be aiming higher, not lower. Stop this foolishness. Dream smaller, Sorella. Dream smaller." The words were meant to be practical, a father's gentle guidance, but they felt like a cage. They wanted me to shrink myself to fit into their world, to accept the box they had built for me. Standing there in the silent falling snow, a profound clarity washed over me. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was accompanied by a fierce cold resolve. They would never understand. They couldn't. They saw my passion as a flaw, my ambition as an embarrassment. I whispered it to the empty street, the words swallowed by the winter night. I don't belong in their world yet, but I would. Not by becoming like them, but by building my own. A world where my dreams weren't too big, and my work wasn't a quaint hobby. I pulled my thin coat tighter and started the long walk home, the snow crunching under my worn-out boots. Each step felt deliberate, a move away from the warmth of their gilded cage and into the cold, uncertain freedom of my own path. The breaking point, the tiny crack of light in my suffocating world, came on a dreary Tuesday afternoon. I was at the brunch cafe, on my break, huddled in a back booth. The hem of my waitress uniform had come undone, a cheap polyester seam that had surrendered to the day's constant motion. I pulled a small emergency sewing kit from my purse, the one I carried everywhere, and began to fix it. My fingers, nimble from thousands of hours of practice, made quick work of the repair, creating a tiny, almost invisible ladder stitch. I was completely absorbed, my world narrowed to the needle and thread, the simple, satisfying act of making something whole again. "That's a blind stitch, a very good one. Fast, too." The voice was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I looked up, startled. An old woman was sitting in the adjacent booth, watching me with an unnerving intensity. She was a riot of color and texture in the drab cafe, a bright purple coat, a tangle of silver necklaces, and large owlish glasses that magnified her sharp, intelligent eyes. She looked like she had lived 1,000 lives and had an opinion on all of them. "I thank you," I stammered, tucking my sewing kit away, feeling suddenly exposed. "Don't put it away," she commanded, her gaze unwavering. "Let me see your hands." Hesitantly, I held them out. She leaned across the aisle, her movements surprisingly quick, and took my hands in hers. Her own were gnarled with arthritis, but her grip was firm. She turned my hands over, examining the calluses on my fingertips, the faint tracery of old scars. "A worker's hands," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "Not a hobbyist's." She let go and leaned back, her eyes never leaving my face. "What else can you do?" she asked, her tone brisk, demanding. It wasn't idle curiosity, it was an interrogation. "I design, I make dresses, mostly for myself," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She snorted, a dry, dismissive sound. "Designing is easy. Every girl with a pencil thinks she's a designer. Can you drape? Can you tailor a lapel? Do you know the difference between charmeuse and crêpe de chine just by touch?" It felt like a test. My defensiveness flared, a spark of the fire I usually kept hidden. "Yes," I said, my voice firmer now. "I can." Her eyebrows shot up over the rim of her glasses, A flicker of something, surprise, interest, crossed her face. She rummaged in her oversized bag and pulled out a linen napkin and a pen. Draw me a design for a woman with a pear-shaped figure, something for a formal event. Go. For the next 10 minutes, under her hawk-like gaze, I sketched. I drew a gown with an A-line silhouette, a structured bodice to create an hourglass illusion, and delicate cap sleeves to balance the proportions. I added notes about fabric, about how a heavier silk would provide structure and flow without clinging. When I was done, I pushed the napkin across the table. She studied it in silence for a long, agonizing minute. She traced the lines with her finger, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up at me. "It's adequate," she said, but her eyes told a different story. "You have an instinct for form." She folded the napkin and tucked it into her coat pocket. "My name is Maureen Kess. Come with me." She stood up and walked out of the cafe without a backward glance, fully expecting me to follow. My shift wasn't over. I should have stayed. But something in her command, in the flicker of validation I had seen in her eyes, pulled me to my feet. I told my manager I was sick and followed her out into the street. She led me several blocks away to a quiet, forgotten side street, to an old brownstone with a dusty, locked-up storefront on the ground floor. She produced a set of ancient-looking keys and opened a side door, leading me up a narrow, creaking staircase. The air grew thick with the scent of dust, old paper, and something else, cedar and wool. She unlocked another door at the top of the stairs and pushed it open. We stepped into a dusty attic workshop. It was a designer's graveyard, or a long-lost paradise. Sunlight streamed through a large, grimy skylight, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Dress forms from different eras stood like silent sentinels, some draped in yellowing muslin. Bolts of fabric, faded but clearly of high quality, were stacked to the ceiling. Shelves overflowed with sketchbooks, jars of buttons, and spools of thread in every color imaginable. "This was my studio," Maureen said, her voice softer now, tinged with a nostalgia so heavy I could feel it. "A long time ago." She walked over to a framed photograph on the wall, wiping a clean streak through the dust with her thumb. It showed a younger Maureen, vibrant and smiling, standing next to a willowy model wearing a stunning, avant-garde gown. Behind them was a banner that read, "La Monta Gala Design Awards." "I was a judge," she said, her back to me. "For the La Monta Gala, the biggest prize in the country. I had a thriving business, a name people respected. Then, there was a scandal. A rival accused me of stealing his designs. It wasn't true, but mudsticks. In this world, perception is everything. My career was destroyed overnight." She turned to face me, her eyes burning with a fierce, ancient anger. "I've been watching you for weeks, at the cafe. I see the hunger in your eyes. I see the passion you try so hard to hide. It's the same passion I had, before they took it all away." She walked towards me, her steps deliberate. She stopped right in front of me, so close I could see the intricate web of lines around her eyes. "I see your potential, Sorella, but potential is worthless without discipline. The world you want to enter is a beautiful, glittering snake pit. It will chew you up and spit you out if you are not tougher, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone else." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the dusty air. "I'll help you," she said, her voice low and serious. "I will teach you everything I know. I'll give you this space to work, but you will pay for it not with money, but with sweat. You will listen to every word I say. You will not question me. You will not complain. And you must outwork everyone. Everyone, are we clear?" 1,000 emotions swirled inside me. Shock, fear, disbelief, and a fragile, overwhelming hope. This strange, broken, brilliant woman was offering me a lifeline. She was offering me a chance, a real chance. I looked around the dusty, magical room, at the ghosts of dresses past, and the promise of a future. I looked at Maureen, at the fire still burning in her eyes, and I knew this was it. This was the moment my life would pivot. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady, crystal clear. The attic became my sanctuary and my crucible. Maureen's words, "You must outwork everyone," became my mantra, a drumbeat that echoed through my waking hours and my restless dreams. The training was relentless, a brutal and beautiful immersion into the craft. My life outside the attic ceased to exist. My waitressing jobs became a necessary evil, a means to an end that I rushed through in a haze of fatigue, my mind already on the lessons that awaited me. Maureen was a merciless teacher. She would rip my sketches to shreds if a single line was lazy. "Fashion is architecture," she'd rasp, forcing me to draw the same design 50 times, from every conceivable angle, until I understood the physics of how it would hang on a human body. "It is not just a pretty picture." She sent me on fabric hunts to obscure, dusty shops in the garment district, with strict instructions and a tiny budget. I learned to distinguish silk blends by touch, to identify quality weave by the way the light hit it, to argue with grizzled old men over the price of a yard of wool. We spent hours on branding, a concept that had been completely alien to me. Maureen made me fill entire notebooks with answers to questions I'd never considered. Who was the woman I was designing for? What did she value? What was the story my clothes were telling? "A dress is just a dress," Maureen would say, pacing the dusty floorboards. "But a brand is a promise. Your family called you cheap. Our brand will be the opposite. It will be about intrinsic value, about the soul of the garment, not the price tag." The late-night sewing sessions intensified. Under Maureen's critical eye, my skills sharpened. I learned to set a sleeve so perfectly it felt like a second skin, to hand-roll a hem so fine it was nearly invisible, to bone a corset so it supported without constricting. My mistakes were frequent and frustrating. I'd sew a seam crooked and have to spend an hour painstakingly unpicking it. I'd cut a pattern wrong and ruin a piece of expensive fabric I couldn't afford to replace. More than once, I threw my shears across the room in a fit of rage and exhaustion, only to meet Maureen's calm, unwavering gaze. "Good," she'd say. "Anger is better than apathy. Now pick them up and do it again. Do it right." I burned through the meager savings I had scraped together. Every spare dollar went to fabric, thread, and books on fashion history. I lived on instant noodles and stale coffee. There were dark moments of doubt when the exhaustion felt like a physical weight pressing down on me, when I would look at my raw, aching fingers and wonder if my father was right, if this was all just a foolish dream. After months of this grueling regimen, Maureen deemed me ready for a small, terrifying step. There was a local designer expo, a small-scale event where up-and-coming artists could rent a booth to showcase their work. "It's time to see if the fish will bite," she declared. We selected 5 of my best pieces, 5 gowns that I had poured my entire being into. Renting the booth took the last of my money. I spent the night before the expo sick with anxiety, convinced no one would even look at my tiny, pathetic display amidst the more established local designers. The day of the expo was a blur. I stood by my rack of dresses, my smile feeling stiff and unnatural. People drifted past, their eyes glazing over my work. The humiliation felt familiar, a cold echo of my sister's engagement party. But then a woman stopped. She was young, with brightly colored hair and an expensive-looking camera slung around her neck. She ran a hand over the sleeve of a blush-pink gown I'd made. "This is beautiful," she said, her eyes wide with genuine appreciation. "The beadwork is incredible. Did you do this by hand?" We talked for 20 minutes. She told me she was a fashion blogger with a modest but dedicated following. She tried on the dress, and it fit her as if it were made for her. She looked at herself in the small mirror I'd brought, a slow, radiant smile spreading across her face. She bought it, my first ever sale. The feel of the crisp bills in my hand was dizzying. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing. Then it wouldn't stop. The blogger had posted a series of photos of herself in the dress. She tagged the expo, but she wrote in the caption, "The best discovery of the day was an unknown designer with no brand name, just a rack of 5 perfect dresses. I don't know who she is, but she's a genius." The post was being shared, liked and commented on at a dizzying speed. It had gone semi-viral in our city's small fashion community. The euphoria was intoxicating. It was real. Someone I didn't know had seen my work and loved it. It was the validation I had been craving for years. The high lasted until the next evening. I was scrolling through the comments on the blog post, my heart soaring, when a new comment appeared. The profile picture was a professionally shot photo of Bellamy, smiling her perfect predatory smile. Her comment was short, public, and designed to kill my nascent moment of triumph. So proud of my little sister's Etsy dreams. It's adorable what people can do with a glue gun and a little free time. The words hit me like a splash of ice water. She had found me. And in one casual, dismissive sentence, she had tried to reduce all my work, all my sleepless nights and bleeding fingers, to a cheap amateur hobby. The world saw a genius. My sister saw a joke. The battle, I realized, had only just begun. The blogger's post, despite Bellamy's acidic comment, acted like a key turning in a long-stuck lock. My phone, which had previously been silent save for calls from my restaurant managers, began to chime with inquiries. Instagram messages from women who had seen the post, asking if I took custom orders. Emails from people who had been at the expo and regretted not stopping at my booth. It was a small trickle of interest, but to me it felt like a flood. Maureen was pragmatic. "A single viral post is a spark," she warned, her voice sharp as ever. "It dies without fuel. Now the real work begins." The trickle of clients became my new obsession. Each one was a chance to prove myself, to build a reputation one stitch at a time. I took on every project, no matter how small: a bridesmaid dress that needed a last-minute alteration, a custom blouse for a woman who wanted to feel beautiful for a job interview, a cocktail dress for a young lawyer attending her first corporate gala. I met them in coffee shops, sketching on napkins, or in the cramped fitting area of my apartment, which was perpetually covered in pins and fabric scraps. My life became an even more frantic dance of exhaustion. I'd work a full 8-hour shift at the brunch spot, rush home to meet a client, then work another 7 hours serving pasta and wine, only to climb the stairs to Maureen's attic and sew until 3 or 4 in the morning. My health began to fray at the edges. A persistent cough settled in my chest. I worked through fevers, my forehead slick with sweat as I concentrated on a delicate seam, my hands shaking slightly. There was no time to be sick. Sickness was a luxury I couldn't afford. One evening, I was hunched over my sewing machine, trying to finish a particularly complex gown, when I heard a soft knock on the attic door. It was my brother, Corbin. He looked uncomfortable, out of place amidst the chaos of my workshop. "Mom and Dad are having dinner at the Carlisle," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I told them I had a work thing. I wanted to see what you were doing." His eyes roamed around the room, taking in the dress forms, the sketches pinned to the walls, the sheer volume of work. He walked over to the gown I was working on, a deep sapphire velvet creation, and gently touched the fabric. "Sorella, this is incredible," he whispered, his voice full of a genuine awe that startled me. I had no idea. He finally looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my older brother, not the family's passive peacekeeper. "Bellamy is just jealous. You know that, right? You have a real talent. This is amazing." A warmth spread through my chest, a feeling so unfamiliar it almost hurt. "Thank you, Corbin," I said, my voice thick with emotion. But then his expression shifted, the familiar fear creeping back into his eyes. "Just be careful," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Don't tell Mom and Dad about this. Not yet, you know how they are. They wouldn't understand. And with Bellamy's wedding coming up, just don't make waves, okay?" His words, meant to be protective, felt like a small betrayal. He admired my work in secret, but he was asking me to keep it, and myself, hidden. He praised my talent, but his first instinct was to protect the family's fragile peace, to keep me from embarrassing them. He was an ally in the shadows, but a coward in the light. After he left, Maureen's voice cut through my thoughts. She had been sitting silently in a corner, observing the entire exchange. "Your brother loves you," she said, her tone flat. "But he is weak. His approval is meaningless. The approval of your family is meaningless. The only thing that matters in the world you are trying to enter is the work." She stood up and walked over to me, her eyes boring into mine. Listen to me, child. Don't just be talented. That's not enough. There are thousands of talented girls with sewing machines. You must be undeniable. Your work must be so good, so powerful, so unique that it silences all critics. It must force them to acknowledge you. Her words galvanized me. She was right. Corbin's secret praise felt good, but it wouldn't build my future. I poured every ounce of my renewed focus into my work. A few weeks later, an opportunity arose that felt like a step into a different league. One of my clients, a makeup artist, recommended me to an actress she was working with. The actress was a relative newcomer, slated to present at a small but well-publicized television awards show. She needed a gown, a showstopper. We worked together for 2 frantic weeks. I designed a dress of shimmering liquid silver fabric that clung to her frame like starlight. It was daring but elegant, the most ambitious design I had ever executed. I finished the final stitch hours before she was due on the red carpet. That night, I watched the awards show on my laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. When the actress stepped onto the stage, a collective gasp went through the audience. The cameras zoomed in. The next day, her picture was everywhere. The fashion blogs and entertainment sites weren't just talking about her. They were talking about her dress. "A star is born, and so is a designer," one headline read. They didn't know my name, but they knew my work. It was undeniable. The success of the awards show gown changed the air around me. It was no longer just a trickle of local clients. It was a steady current. I was finally able to quit the brunch spot. The smell of grease and burnt toast replaced by the constant clean scent of new fabric. The extra hours this freed up were immediately swallowed by more work. But it was my work, my dream. I was still exhausted, still living on the financial edge. But for the first time it felt sustainable. The path ahead, while steep, was at least visible. Then came the email. It was from the agent of a major social media influencer, a woman famous for being famous, whose every outfit was dissected and replicated by millions of followers. She had seen the silver gown. She wanted to commission a piece for the upcoming Met Gala, the absolute pinnacle of fashion events. My heart leaped into my throat. The Met Gala, it was a fantasy, a world away from my dusty attic. But then came the catch. I read the email again, my blood running cold. The influencer wanted to commission the gown, and she would pay a staggering amount, a sum that would not only clear all my debts, but would also give me enough capital to finally properly launch my own brand. However, the offer came with a non-negotiable condition. She would claim full credit for the design. She would tell the world she had designed it herself. My name was to be nowhere. I would be a ghost, a secret stitcher paid for my silence. I sat there, staring at the screen. The number, that beautiful, life-changing number, glowing in the dark. It was a devil's bargain. All my financial worries gone in an instant. I could finally pay Maureen back for her generosity, rent a proper studio, hire an assistant. I could have a life. All I had to do was sell my name, my soul. I almost did it. The temptation was a physical ache. I imagined my bank account full. I imagined not having to choose between buying fabric and paying my electricity bill. I imagined a full night's sleep. I printed out the offer and took it to Maureen, my hands shaking. "This could solve everything," I whispered, my voice betraying my desperation. Maureen took the paper, her eyes scanning the words without expression. She was silent for a long time. The only sound in the attic was the hum of the old radiator. When she finally looked at me, her gaze was heavy with a sorrowful wisdom. "Your family has been trying to erase you for years, child," she said, her voice quiet but powerful. "They made you invisible at parties. They dismissed your work. They told you to be smaller, quieter, less yourself. They already erased you once. Don't you dare sell them the tools to do it again for a bag of silver." She tore the paper in half, then in half again, and let the pieces flutter to the floor like dead leaves. "Your name is all you have. Your work is your voice. The moment you let someone else put their name on it, you have silenced yourself. That money is a prison, not a key. It will buy you comfort, but it will cost you your pride, your future, your entire reason for doing this." She walked over to a dress form that held one of my earliest flawed creations. She touched the fabric gently. "This is you," she said. "This is your story. Do not let them buy it from you." Her words hit me with the force of absolute truth. Shame washed over me for even considering it. What was the point of all this struggle, all this sacrifice, if I was just going to hand over the credit to someone with more money and less integrity? I walked out of the attic, went back to my apartment, and typed out a polite but firm refusal. I hit send, and with that single click, I watched a fortune disappear. That night, a notice was slipped under my door. My electric bill was past due. The power would be shut off in 2 days. I sat in the dark, the threat of disconnection hanging over me, but my heart felt lighter than it had in days. I was broke, I was exhausted, but I was not for sale. I hadn't regretted the decision for a single second. I owned my name. It was worth more than anything they could ever offer. Walking away from the influencer's offer felt like a moral victory, but it left a practical void. The loss of that potential income, combined with the boutique's sudden expansion, meant my financial situation was more precarious than ever. I was banking everything on this partnership. The boutique had given me a larger section, a prime spot near the front window. My collection, now consisting of a dozen unique pieces, was the first thing customers saw when they walked in. Sales were steady, and for the first time I felt a fragile sense of security. I was building something real, something tangible. That security shattered on a cold Thursday morning. I received a call from Anna, the boutique owner. Her voice was strained, laced with an anxiety that immediately set my own nerves on edge. "Sorella, we need to talk," she said. "Can you come by the shop?" I arrived 20 minutes later, my stomach churning. Anna led me to her small, cluttered office in the back. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She wrung her hands, her face pale. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to say this." "What is it, Anna? What's wrong?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound. She finally looked at me, her eyes full of pity. "I got a letter this morning, from a lawyer." She pushed a thick piece of stationery across the desk. I picked it up. The letterhead was from a top-tier corporate law firm, the kind that didn't come cheap. I scanned the first paragraph, and the words leaped off the page. "Cease and desist. Unauthorized use of Wynn family name. Potential brand dilution. Trademark infringement." My blood ran cold. It made no sense. Wynn was my name. How could I be infringing on it? Then I saw the name of the client the firm was representing. Bellamy Wynn. "She's claiming you're using the family name to trick people into thinking your clothes are associated with her and her fiancé's business ventures," Anna explained, her voice trembling slightly. "She's threatening to sue me, to sue the boutique, for damages. She says your amateur work is harming the Wynn family's reputation for luxury." The audacity of it was breathtaking, the cruelty, so precise and so personal. Bellamy hadn't just insulted me online. She had weaponized our family name against me. She had found my one small foothold in the world, and was trying to systematically pry my fingers off it. "It's absurd, Anna," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "She can't do this. Wynn is my name." "I know," Anna whispered, "but Sorella, I can't afford a legal battle with these people. They're billionaires. They would ruin me. I'm a small business owner. I have a family. I have to ask you to take your collection out of the store." The words hung in the air, a death sentence for my nascent brand. "Please," she begged, tears welling in her eyes. "I believe in you, I do, but I can't lose everything." I felt numb. All that work, all that progress, erased overnight by a single letter born of spite. I walked out onto the shop floor. My beautiful dresses, the ones that held all my hopes and dreams, suddenly looked like evidence in a crime I didn't commit. I packed them up myself, carefully folding each one and placing it into garment bags, my movements stiff and robotic. The other shop assistants averted their eyes, whispering amongst themselves. The sense of shame was suffocating. I felt like I was being evicted, banished, all over again. I hauled the bags back to the attic, the weight of them feeling immense, a physical manifestation of my defeat. I dropped them on the floor and sank down beside them, the fight completely gone from me. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. What was the point? Every time I took one step forward, Bellamy and my family were there to push me 2 steps back. They had more money, more power, more influence. They would always win. I told Maureen what had happened, my voice flat and emotionless. I told her I was quitting. I would go back to waitressing full-time. I would pay her back for her help, eventually. I would dream smaller. Maureen listened in silence, her expression unreadable. She let me finish, let the silence in the attic stretch until it was taut with my despair. Then she walked over to the grimy window, looking down at the street below. "When they tried to destroy me," she said, her voice a low growl, "I ran. I hid up here in this dusty tomb and let them win. I let them turn my fire into embers. And I have regretted it every single day for 30 years." She turned from the window, and her eyes were blazing, 2 burning coals in her wrinkled face. "They have knocked you down. They have hurt you. They have humiliated you. So now you have a choice." She strode towards me, her presence filling the room with a sudden ferocious energy. She crouched down, forcing me to look at her. "You can stay here on the floor." A little spark of talent that they snuffed out with a single breath. "You can smolder and die, and spend the rest of your life wondering what if." Or, she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to an intense whisper, "You can be a wildfire. You can take this rage and this hurt, and you can let it burn so hot and so bright that it consumes everything in its path. You can build something they can't touch, something they can't threaten, something they can't tear down. You can be a spark, or you can be a wildfire, child. Choose." Her words were like a lightning strike to my soul. A wildfire. The image ignited something in me, something I thought had been extinguished. The numbness began to recede, replaced by a white-hot anger. She was right. I could let Bellamy win, or I could use this attack as fuel. My sister thought she had ended me. She had no idea what she had just started. I looked at the garment bags on the floor, not as symbols of defeat, but as a collection of seeds. They had kicked me out of their garden. Fine, I would grow my own forest. "A wildfire," I repeated, the word tasting of power on my tongue. I stood up, brushing the dust from my clothes. My spine felt straighter, my resolve hardened into something unbreakable. "Show me how." The decision to become a wildfire transformed my strategy. The old model was dead. Relying on boutiques, on gatekeepers like Anna, made me vulnerable. Bellamy could crush me again just by making a phone call. I needed a fortress, a direct line to the women who wanted to wear my clothes, a space that my family's influence couldn't penetrate. The answer was obvious, terrifying, and exhilarating. I had to build my own brand, on my own terms, online. Maureen and I went into war room mode. The attic, once just a workshop, became a command center. We started with the name. Win was now toxic, a liability. "You need something that is yours alone," Maureen insisted. We spent days brainstorming, filling chalkboards with words and concepts. We settled on Winform. It was a subtle nod to my heritage, the name I couldn't escape, but reformed, reshaped into something new. It spoke of transformation, of shaping one's own form. It was perfect. It was perfect. Maureen forming a subtle Evmasoft, building an online store from scratch, was like learning a new language. While I knew fabric and form, I knew nothing of e-commerce platforms, payment gateways, or digital marketing. My nights were no longer just about sewing, they were about staring at a computer screen, teaching myself logistics, branding, and search engine optimization through free online tutorials and sheer trial and error. I designed the website myself, a clean, minimalist space designed to showcase the clothes without distraction. Every photograph, every product description, every line of code was a battle I had to win. Maureen, for her part, transformed into a ruthless creative director. She pushed me to design a small, cohesive launch collection. "We're not just selling dresses," she'd repeat, like a mantra. "We are selling a story. The story of a woman who is unapologetically herself." The biggest strategic decision we made was about my identity. We would use my real first name, Sorella, as the designer. It was mine, untainted by the family drama. But we would not use my face. The About Us page would tell the story of a passionate, self-taught designer, but there would be no photos of me. My work would be the face of the brand. This anonymity was partly for protection, to keep me off Bellamy's radar for as long as possible, but it also added a layer of mystique. In a world of oversharing influencers, the faceless designer was an enigma. We launched Winform on a quiet Tuesday, with no fanfare, just a single hopeful click of a button. For the first few days, there was nothing but the sound of digital crickets. The doubt began to creep back in. Had I made a massive mistake? Had I poured all my energy and the last of my money into a ghost ship? Then we got our first order. Then another. They were small, but they were real. We packed each dress ourselves in beautiful custom boxes Maureen had insisted on, with handwritten thank you notes. We were building a brand not just on design, but on a personal connection. The turning point came from the most unexpected of places. A TikTok creator, a young woman known for her dance videos who had a few 100,000 followers, somehow found our website. She ordered a simple, elegant black dress. A week later, she posted a video. It wasn't a dance video. It was just her, standing in her bedroom, wearing the dress. She slowly twirled for the camera, the fabric flowing perfectly around her. The caption was simple: "I have never felt more beautiful in my entire life. This is from a new store called Winform." The video exploded. Millions of views. The algorithm, for whatever reason, had picked it up and shown it to the world. My phone started to buzz and didn't stop for 3 days. Orders flooded the website, far more than I could possibly handle. The black dress sold out in an hour. Then the rest of the collection sold out. We were completely overwhelmed, a chaotic, euphoric mess. I had to stop taking orders, putting a sold-out sign on the entire website. I hired 2 part-time seamstresses, friends of a friend from the garment district, to help me fulfill the backlog. My apartment became a shipping center, buried in boxes and packing tape. The success was dizzying, but also terrifyingly anonymous. My family, I was certain, remained clueless. They wouldn't be following a TikTok dancer. They wouldn't have heard of a small, independent online store called Winform. I was building a secret empire right under their noses. As we were wading through the sea of orders, one came in that was different. The shipping address was a corporate office in Paris. The name on the order was innocuous, something like Nanette Martin, but the email address associated with the order was from the domain revo.com. I stared at it, my heart stopping. Revo, as in Dante Revo, the single most famous and revered fashion designer on the planet. "Maureen," I called out, my voice barely a whisper. "You need to see this." She looked at the screen, her owlish glasses perched on her nose. A slow smile spread across her face, the first genuine, unguarded smile I had ever seen from her. "Well, well," she murmured. "It seems the wildfire is sending up smoke signals, and someone important has noticed." We treated the order with the reverence of a holy relic. I inspected every stitch of the gown, a new design, one of my most ambitious, 10 times over. We wrapped it in layers of silk paper and placed it in our finest box. As I sealed it, I had a strange feeling, a sense of destiny, as if I were sending a message in a bottle into a vast, powerful ocean, hoping it would reach the right shore. I had no idea that this single anonymous order was about to change my life forever. Weeks after shipping the Revo order, an email landed in my inbox. It was unlike any I had ever received. The sender was simply Office of Dante Revo. The subject line read, "An invitation." My hand trembled as I clicked it open. The body of the email was minimalist and direct. It stated that Mr. Revo had been exceptionally impressed with a recent acquisition from a new online designer, Sorella of Winform. He found the work to be a breath of fresh air in a stale landscape. Therefore, he was extending a personal invitation for the designer, Sorella, to attend the upcoming Le Monte Winter Gala as his guest. I read it 3 times, convinced my sleep-deprived eyes were deceiving me. The Le Monte Gala, The most exclusive, prestigious event in the country. A place I had only ever read about in magazines, a fantasy land inhabited by the very people who had cast me out. And I was being invited not as a plus one, not as a spectator, but as the personal guest of Dante Rivo. I showed the email to Maureen. She read it, her face impassive, but I saw a flicker of triumph in her eyes, a deep, resonant pride. "This is it," she said, her voice quiet. "This is the stage. Everything we have worked for comes down to this night. You will not just attend, you will make a statement." The statement, we decided, would be my dress. I would wear my own design, the culmination of everything I had learned, everything I had endured. It would be my declaration. I set to work on what I knew would be the most important garment of my life. A gown of pale, ice blue silk that seemed to drink the light, with a structure that was both powerful and ethereal. It was my heart, rendered in fabric. The night before the gala, my mother called for our obligatory family dinner. It was at their club, a stuffy place with dark wood paneling and oil paintings of dead rich men. The tension was thicker than the soup. Bellamy was holding court, of course, her engagement ring flashing under the chandeliers as she gesticulated wildly. "Dante Rivo himself is dressing me for the Lamont Gala tomorrow night," she announced to the table, her voice ringing with smug satisfaction. "It's a one-of-a-kind piece. He's only doing a handful of custom gowns this season. Obviously, I was at the top of his list." My father beamed with pride. "That's my girl, always aiming for the best." My mother nodded in agreement, casting a brief, pitying glance in my direction, the unspoken message clear: this is what a successful daughter looks like. Corbin sat silently, stirring his drink. He caught my eye for a moment, a flicker of apology in his expression, before looking away. I waited for the perfect moment, a small lull in the conversation. Then, I took a calm sip of water. "That sounds lovely, Bellamy," I said, my voice even and clear. "I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'll be attending as well." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick Persian rug. My father choked on his wine. My mother's perfectly painted smile froze in place. Bellamy was the first to recover. She let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. "You?" she scoffed, her eyes wide with mock astonishment. "You, at the Lamonta Gala? Sorella, don't be ridiculous. Did you get a job with the waitstaff? Is that it? Are you finally putting your skills to good use?" Her fiancé snickered. My father looked deeply uncomfortable. "Sorella, perhaps you're mistaken," he said, trying to smooth things over. "It's a very exclusive event. Tickets are nearly impossible to get." "I have a ticket," I said simply, not rising to the bait. "I was invited." "Invited?" Bellamy's voice dripped with scorn. "By whom? The janitorial staff? Don't lie, Sorella. It's unbecoming. You can't just wander into a place like the Lamonta Gala. You don't belong there. You'll only embarrass yourself, and us." The old sting of her words was there, but it was distant now, muted by the secret I held. The invitation from Dante Rivo felt like a shield, protecting me from her venom. I looked at her, at the absolute certainty on her face that I was a nobody, a loser, a pathetic little wannabe, and I felt nothing but a calm, cool resolve. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply gave a small, enigmatic smile. "You'll see," I said. I let them laugh. I let them mock me. I let them sit there, secure in their gilded world, convinced of my insignificance. Let them have this one last moment of superiority, because I knew something they didn't. I knew that tomorrow night, on the biggest stage imaginable, their world, and my entire life, was about to change. And I wouldn't have to say a word. My work would do the talking for me. The night of the gala felt electric, the air itself humming with anticipation. As I stepped out of the taxi and onto the red-carpeted steps of the Lamonte Museum, a sea of flashing camera bulbs momentarily blinded me. This was it, the world my family worshipped, the pinnacle of status and style. For a moment, a wave of the old insecurity washed over me. I was an imposter, a girl in a handmade dress about to walk into a lion's den of couture. But then I felt the cool, smooth silk of my gown against my skin, the weight of its perfect drape, and I remembered Maureen's words, "Be undeniable." I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked forward. Inside, the ballroom was even more breathtaking than I had imagined. It was a cavern of light and sound, filled with the most famous and powerful people in the country. And there, in the center of it all, was Bellamy. She was in her element, a queen holding court. Her Revo gown was exactly what I expected, a dramatic, almost severe black dress that screamed, "Look at me." Photographers buzzed around her like moths to a flame, and she basked in their attention, her smile wide and triumphant. She spotted me as I made my way through the crowd. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief and irritation. She detached herself from her circle of admirers and strode towards me, her fiancé trailing in her wake like a well-trained dog. "I cannot believe you actually showed up," she hissed, her voice low and furious, making sure no one else could hear. "How did you get in? Did you seriously forge a ticket?" She looked around conspiratorially. "You're not on the guest list. I checked." "I am on the list, Bellamy," I said, my voice calm. Her eyes narrowed. "Stop it. I don't know what pathetic game you're playing, but you need to leave, now, before you get thrown out and humiliate us all." Just then, a figure of immense grace and authority glided past. It was Felicity Lamont, the matriarch of the family that hosted the gala, the undisputed arbiter of high society. She was a legend, a woman whose single nod of approval could make a career. As she passed, her sharp eyes swept over me, from the top of my head to the hem of my ice blue gown. She paused for a fraction of a second, her expression unreadable, and then she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a sign of acknowledgement, of approval. Bellamy saw it. The flicker of confusion on her face was deeply satisfying. She couldn't comprehend it. Why would Felicity Lamont, of all people, acknowledge me? The sight of it short-circuited her brain. Her scorn, however, quickly rebooted. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in a sneer of practiced disgust, her gaze landing on my dress. It was time for her final, most cutting blow. "Honestly, Sorella," she said, her voice dripping with pity, loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "I almost feel sorry for you. Coming here, trying so hard to fit in. Tell me," she leaned in, her voice a stage whisper that carried, "what knockoff are you wearing tonight? Did you stitch that together in your sad little apartment? You look like you bought that off a clearance rack." The familiar words, the same insult she had used in my imagination of this moment, echoed in the grand ballroom. A few people who overheard her snickered. It was the ultimate humiliation, delivered on the grandest possible stage. The old me would have crumbled. The old me would have fled in tears. But I was not the old me. I just smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, because I could feel a shift in the room's energy. The music, which had been swelling, seemed to dip in volume. A hush was beginning to spread from the grand entrance. The crowd was parting. Someone important was arriving. The music swelled, a grand classical piece that announced the climax of the evening, and through the crowd he walked. Dante Rivo. He was magnetic, a center of gravity in a room full of stars. He wore a simple black suit, yet he outshone everyone. His eyes, intense and searching, scanned the crowd. Bellamy immediately straightened up, a predatory glint in her eye, ready to claim her prize, to be seen with the master who had dressed her. But he didn't look at her. His gaze swept right past her, continuing its search, and then, his eyes found me. He stopped. Everything stopped. The world seemed to slow down, the noise of the ballroom fading into a dull roar. His expression was one of dawning recognition, of profound, unadulterated shock, of discovery. It was the look of an artist who has just found his masterpiece. He started walking towards me, his path unwavering. The crowd parted for him, a wave of whispers and confused glances rippling in his wake. Why was he walking towards her? Who was she? Bellamy stood frozen, her triumphant smile slowly dissolving into a mask of utter confusion. This wasn't how this was supposed to happen. he was supposed to come to her. He stopped directly in front of me, ignoring my sister completely. He looked at my dress, his eyes tracing every seam, every fold of fabric, with a reverence that made my heart pound. He reached out and gently touched the silk on my sleeve, his expression a mixture of awe and relief. Then he looked at me, and he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight and authority that commanded the attention of the entire room. The silence was now absolute. "There you are," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. The words were for me, but everyone heard them. A gasp echoed through the ballroom. Bellamy's face turned a shade of pale I had never seen before, a sickly, chalky white. Ravo's eyes shone with a brilliant, artistic passion. "I have been searching for the person who made the gown my assistant acquired. A work of genius, a work of soul." He gestured to my ice blue creation. I saw this, and for the first time in a decade, I felt hope. He turned his gaze slightly, addressing the sea of stunned, silent faces around us. "For years, I have felt that fashion has lost its heart. It has become about labels, about price tags, about status. It has become hollow." He looked back at me, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. And then I saw this. A dress that is not just a garment, but a story. It has technique, grace, power. It has a voice. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the room. "This is the woman who made me fall in love with fashion again." Another collective gasp, louder this time. Bellamy looked like she was going to be physically sick. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide with horror. The world she had so carefully constructed, where she was the star and I was the embarrassing footnote, was crumbling around her in real time. But Dante Ravo wasn't finished. He offered me his arm, a gesture of supreme respect. "The Lamonta Gala is not just a party," he announced, his voice ringing with purpose. "It is a celebration of artistry, and it is my distinct honor to introduce you to the future of it." He gestured with his free hand towards the small stage at the front of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he projected, his voice filling the cavernous space, "let me introduce the most promising new talent of the year, the designer, Sorella Wynne." The name, my name, echoed through the ballroom. Sorella Wynne, not a knockoff, not a hobbyist, a designer. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then a single person began to clap. Then another, and another. Suddenly the room erupted in applause. The camera flashes, which had been focused on Bellamy moments before, now swiveled and converged on me, a blinding, brilliant storm of light. I could hear the whispers, sharp and incredulous, cutting through the applause. "Wynne? Is that her sister? Bellamy Wynne's sister is a designer?" He called her his muse. I looked over at Bellamy. She was speechless, her face a pale, frozen mask of shock and humiliation. The champagne flute she had been holding slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. The sound was lost in the thunderous applause. Her moment of triumph had been utterly and completely eclipsed. In front of everyone she had ever wanted to impress, her world had been turned upside down by the one person she never ever saw coming. The applause eventually subsided, but the buzzing energy in the room remained, a low hum of gossip and recalibration. Alliances were shifting. Social hierarchies were being redrawn in real time. Bellamy, for her part, tried to recover. She forced a brittle laugh, turning to the woman next to her. "Oh, Sorella," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "She just got lucky. Dante has always had a soft spot for charity cases." But the words were hollow. No one was listening. All eyes were on me. Then, a figure detached from the crowd and approached with an air of regal purpose. It was Felicity Lamont. She stopped before me, her expression one of cool, professional appraisal. The brief nod from earlier now made perfect sense. She had recognized the quality of the dress instantly. "Miss Wynne," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "An exquisite design. Truly, the structure of the bodice is a masterclass in tailoring." She wasn't just offering a compliment, she was delivering a verdict. In this world, her word was law. Mr. Rivo was not exaggerating. "Your work is what this industry needs." She gave a thin, knowing smile, The Lamont board is always searching for new voices to join our design panel for next year's gala. We will be in touch. It was an anointment, a public declaration that I was not a fluke, not a one-night wonder, but a serious contender. Bellamy, who had been trying to regain her footing, seemed to shrink. To be offered a spot on the Lamont panel was a dream she had secretly coveted for years. To see it offered to me, right in front of her, was a fresh and devastating blow. A small crowd of reporters and bloggers had gathered, held back by a velvet rope. One of them called out, "Sorella, can you give us a statement? How does it feel?" All my life, I had been silent. I had swallowed the insults, absorbed the humiliation, and retreated into myself. But now, standing here, validated by the very pinnacles of the world that had rejected me, I found my voice. I looked past the reporters, making eye contact with anyone who would listen. For a long time, I began, my voice steady and strong. I let other people define my worth. They told me my dreams were too big, and my talents were too small. I didn't look at Bellamy, but I could feel her eyes on me. They told me to be quiet, to be smaller, to fit into the box they had made for me. Tonight is proof that you should never, ever let anyone else write your story. I paused, taking a breath. Believe in your work. Believe in your voice. Believe in yourself, especially when no one else does. Because your passion is not a hobby, it's your power. The words felt true, earned. As I finished, I glanced across the room. I saw my brother, Corbin, standing near a pillar. There were tears streaming down his face, not tears of pity, but of pride and regret. He looked at me and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." It was a small gesture, but it was a start. And in a shadowed alcove, far from the lights and the crowds, I saw her, Maureen. She was leaning against the wall, a small, satisfied smile on her face. She didn't need to be in the spotlight. Her victory was seeing me in it. She caught my eye and gave a single sharp nod, the same nod she had given me in the dusty attic when I had finally mastered a difficult stitch. It was the highest praise she could offer, and it meant more to me than all the applause in the world. The weeks following the gala were a whirlwind. My name, Sorella Wynn, and my brand, Winform, were on the front page of every fashion blog and magazine. The story was irresistible. The secret sister, the public revelation, the anointing by Dante Rivaux. My website, which I had to relaunch with a team of professionals, was flooded with more orders than I could have dreamed of. The narrative my family had tried to write for me, the embarrassing, talentless failure, had been completely and publicly erased, replaced by one of my own making. I didn't wait for the Lamont board to call. With the capital from my explosive sales and a small strategic investment that Dante himself helped me secure, I did something I had only ever allowed myself to imagine in my wildest dreams. I leased a storefront in Soho. Today is the grand opening of my first boutique. It's a beautiful space, with high ceilings and clean white walls. It's not cluttered or chaotic like my old attic workshop. It's serene, confident. The walls are lined with my gowns, each one a testament to a sleepless night, a pricked finger, a moment of doubt overcome. And on one feature wall, framed in simple, elegant black frames, are my original sketches, the ones Maureen had nearly ripped to shreds, the ones I had cried over. They are not just designs, they are my history. My staff consists of 3 young women. None of them have a degree from a prestigious fashion school. One is a self-taught draper I found on Instagram. Another is a brilliant pattern maker who was told she didn't have the right look for the industry. And the third is a young immigrant with an incredible eye for beadwork who was struggling to find work. I hired them because I saw in them the same hunger, the same raw talent, the same fire that Maureen saw in me. I gave them the chance that no one else would. My family has been silent. I received a single stilted text from my mother asking if we could discuss things. I haven't replied. Bellamy has, according to the gossip columns, postponed her wedding indefinitely. I take no joy in her downfall, only a quiet satisfaction in my own ascent. The best revenge isn't seeing your enemies fail, it's living a life so full and successful that they no longer occupy any space in it. I stand by the large front window of my boutique, looking out at the bustling streets of Soho. Women are already starting to line up outside, waiting for the doors to open. It all feels so surreal, a lifetime away from serving coffee and fixing torn hems in the back of a cafe. They used to call me embarrassing, a quaint hobbyist, a nobody. Now they call me for interviews. They call me the future. This journey wasn't just about making dresses, it was about finding my voice, stitch by painful stitch. It was about learning that my worth was never determined by their judgment. It was always there, waiting to be tailored, shaped, and shown to the world. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever been called worthless, remember this. Remember that the most beautiful things are often forged in pressure and in darkness. Remember that your value is not a reflection in someone else's critical eyes. It's the fire inside you. Never let them extinguish it, because even diamonds, after all, come from dirt. Sometimes the people closest to you will doubt you the most. Let their disbelief be your fuel, not your cage. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Let me know in the comments. Your story might inspire someone. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful transformations just like this. This is the Triumph Archive, bringing you real stories of quiet revenge and earned triumph. See you next time.